And we'll be ready to start exactly at 4.
Sounds good.
And yes, record.
Okay, and now you're in. Great.
Okay, let's get this
Recording
started.
in progress.
Recording in progress. Thanks for coming to the April 12th Planning Committee. I'd like to acknowledge we're holding the meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin Nation. We have an agenda in front of us. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda or adopt the agenda? Director Brabazon, Director McCormick, thank you very much. Any discussion? All in favor? Hey, get this started.
Recording in progress.
Motion carries. Recording in progress. And number 3, thanks for coming to the April 12th Planning Committee meeting, March 8th, 2022. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get a motion to adopt? Director McCormick, seconded. Director Gisborne. All in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. We have 2 delegations today. The first one is Shawn Tougas. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. BC Timber Sales, Planning Forester regarding BC Timber Sales Sunshine Coast 2022 to 2026 operating plan. Is he with us today?
He's on here. Yes. Carrie.
Yes. Perfect. Okay. Shawn, welcome. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah. And, thanks for having me here today as a delegation. You've already introduced me. I should say that I'm here at a request from a previous meeting we're having with planning staff, and we're going through our annual process where we're engaging on our 5-year plan. So the suggestion was to do a presentation on that plan here as well. So I can share my screen, and I just have a brief presentation and a couple things to look at in Google Earth. So can you see my screen here showing just the PowerPoint slide?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so I'm the planning forester here for BCTS on the Sunshine Coast. We're a program within the provincial government and the Ministry of Forests. So I work out of the district office on Duncan Street in town. In BCTS, we're a forestry operator for the provincial government. So we operate on 20% of the land base across the province. And our mandate is to develop and auction and oversee the reforestation on cut blocks. And through that activity, we're able to capture the cost information as a forestry operator and revenue information from an auction in cut blocks. And that data feeds into the market price system, which goes into how provincial public land is charged for private industry. So the Sunshine Coast is part of the broader Chinook business area on this map. And we work with a team out of Squamish and Chilliwack and Haida Gwaii, but we have a distinct unit out of Powell River in the Sunshine Coast as well. Ultimately, we report to our timber sales manager out of Chilliwack, who's the statutory decision maker for the BCTS area here. This is an overview of the chart areas where BCTS develops and auctions cut blocks. So in purple, it's the areas that we have to operate in and kind of conduct our planning initiatives in. And I can go into a bit more detail into these areas in a couple of minutes. This is the broad overview of our legislative and policy framework from the Forest and Range Practices Act and the Forest Planning and Practices Regulation. Feeds into our forest stewardship plan and our internal policy and certification requirements. And all of that goes into our development and what we put out for cut blocks and roads, and then that feeds through the engagement and consultation cycle, which is part of the continuous cycle of updating our operations and ultimately moving forward to auction. So part of this process is showing where we plan to operate over our 5-year cycle, and we engage on that process each year. And a main product is the maps for each area, showing where we have cut blocks and roads and the various values that are being managed on the land base. This is an example of part of one map in Theodosia, and it shows the blocks in various stages. Since it is that 5-year cycle, we do have blocks that are planned on the auction schedule this year that have gone through the development and engineering and assessment and consultation activities, and they're planned to be put out to auction. We still show them on the map to give a sense of the 5-year plan. And then there's blocks that are further out, planned in 2025 and 2026 that are newer to the plan, and they're just in the initial stages. And then we have blocks and roads in between. So we also have the GIS information as part of our operating plan products, and our cut block and road tables, which show information on each cut block and road. And I wanted to mention that it came up in some of our previous meetings, the various studies that are available from the regional district here. And we have been going through them and making sure we're in alignment for the broader plans that are in these areas, the regional trail plan and various natural hazard studies and drainage structure plans. I just wanted to give a sense of the chart areas and where we have the blocks planned in the regional district here. So part of what I operate in includes the lower Sunshine Coast and up Dervis Inlet, and further north for the regional district here. We have operations and cut blocks planned in the north Malaspina Peninsula area. Theodosia is a large chart area where we have, in this broader purple is our chart area where we do operate in, and then the smaller purple polygons and red lines are where we have planned cut blocks and roads. So in Theodosia is an important area for the Tla'amin Nation with shared decision-making commitments in the treaty. And there's a chart area where we have operations. And further north, we have Humphrey Channel, Toba Inlet, operations up here. We have a few smaller parcels closer to town and south of town. The only cut block we have planned in here right now is in the Mount Mahoney area, which we've been working with trail user groups on and supporting their larger plans and initiatives for establishing legal trails there. We have an area around Dodd and Horseshoe Lake within or surrounded by the tree farm license that Western holds here. And then various blocks closer to just south of Lois Lake and going up Lois River. And we have operations here around Hotham Sound as well. So that's the broad overview. Wanted to give an opportunity for questions if anybody has any. I hope I didn't go too quickly over that, but I was just planning on giving kind of broad overview of what we do and what we have kind of planned in the area.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll open it up to questions from any of the directors. Director McCormick.
Thank you very much, Chair. Interesting presentation. So thank you very much for that. I am a little concerned when I see all of the purple areas that go right down to the water. And, you know, visual, you know, objectives was on your list of things under stewardship and engagement. And I'm just wondering how you're going to, or if there is going to be a buffer along the water where the purple goes right down to that area, or if you're going to cut right down to the water and the visual quality would be, of course, significantly diminished.
Yeah, so visuals are certainly an objective that is managed for from a legal perspective, and there are visual quality objectives that we do meet and generally exceed. So this purple area, I should say, is the area that we can operate in subject to those objectives. So depending where you are, there's various levels of visual objectives that are the targets that we would manage for from the perspective on the ground from public viewpoints. So it does depend on the area, but I can say that there certainly are buffers that are put in place, and it is a consideration that's made on every block where there is an objective, and there generally are objectives for most of our blocks in these areas, and anywhere that would be a significant public viewpoint. So it's difficult to not, I'm trying to force myself not to get too in the weeds of kind of all the structure that goes into it, but it is certainly something that feeds into our planning process, and of areas of higher significance, we'll plan to make the block not visible or various levels in between where it fits into the natural landscape. But there's certainly a science that goes behind that, and making sure that it kind of fits into the natural character of the area around it.
Follow up, Chair, if I could, just to be certain, when I look at the map and it looks like, you know, the cut goes all the way down to the water, and to be honest, that would be really ugly if that was the case. So can you give us assurance today that there will be a buffer along the ocean, and that we won't be seeing this bald, you know, these bald areas, which should normally be forested?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you assurance that we manage to the standard that is on the land base. And I should mention too, there is an initiative that's ongoing in reestablishing the visual objectives. It's managed at the broader provincial level, and there's been an engagement process with the public and stakeholders and First Nations related to that process. So as soon as those new objectives come out, that's the new objectives that we manage for. And you know, it's certainly something that is part of our planning process. And generally that does mean we wouldn't go down to the water, and there's various other values that would limit us doing that as well. But I wouldn't see many examples where it would be a bald face on the mountain going right down to the ocean. I know it's definitely an asset that we consider in our planning, and kind of have to look at specific examples, but I don't expect I would see one that is kind of the landscape that you're envisioning here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Director Brabazon had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Tougas. Do your cut blocks have a maximum size? Maximum allowable size?
Yeah, so the provincial standard on the coast is 40 hectares, and in the interior it's 60, but there are various requirements around that. If there's forest health considerations, sometimes they can be larger. Generally speaking, we don't exceed the 40 hectare limit, and we're usually closer to the 10-20 hectare limit. It kind of depends on the area and the other values that are being considered.
Do you have, or are you restricted on exporting of logs?
So BCTS being within the provincial government, there are standards for where our licensees who auction or who bid on these blocks, where that wood can go. And there's a category of local logs. Sort of an area that I'm not as familiar with. It's kind of a broader provincial sort of framework for that. But generally speaking, our operations are more local, kind of smaller business operators, smaller mills, and kind of people that you would see around town sort of thing. Sometimes there are larger companies that bid on the blocks, and then it's up to them for where they process those logs.
Thank you.
All right, we're just about out of time, but I think everybody's fine to add another 5 minutes to it. Any objections to that?
No.
Okay, Director Gisborne, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think my first question was answered indirectly. Just clarifying that the large purple area is the area being managed, and then the little white areas are where logging is going to be taking place. So my second question, because thankfully the first one was already answered, I noticed on the map of British Columbia, our area is designated as a Chinook area. I also noticed that up around Haida Gwaii, it also was labeled as Chinook. So the two areas don't appear to be attached. I was just wondering, are they separate areas, or are they under the same kind of Chinook management?
Yeah, I maybe missed that in describing those. It was part of the Chinook business area, so that's managed part of our unit as well. we have 4 distinct units within the Chinook business area. So the office here in town manages the lower Sunshine Coast and the upper Sunshine Coast, but our managers and some staff that kind of oversee the broader area do interact with us. So Haida Gwaii is its own distinct unit. And my day-to-day doesn't interact with them too much, but it is something that our managers would kind of oversee. So it includes Squamish and Chilliwack as well.
Okay.
It's a small office up there. But, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. No further questions.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. So Mr. Tougas, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Okay, we're moving on to our second delegation. There's quite a few people here involved. I don't know if you want to just introduce yourself when you come up, whoever's presenting.
I think I'm doing most of the presenting, and I was going to. So my name is Tyabji, former councillor for the city of Powell River, former chair of the planning committee for the city of Powell River. I served on the regional district as one of the 2 city reps, former Liberal MLA for Okanagan East, and I had the portfolios of environment and agriculture when I was MLA. And behind me, and it's not often that you'll see a development where everybody in the room is female. And I do want to point that out. There are men involved with this, but here today you have some of the investors. Lisa Bartello, who is a realtor, an investor, and also somebody who's going to speak to wellness is here. Stephanie Marwood is a naturopath and a counselor and is not going to be speaking, but is an investor. We have Rachelle Gura, who's an investor, who is also someone who does yoga, kinetics, wellness, and small business. I think everybody here actually is in small business. My Aunt Pam, who is here because she's awesome. And we've got Fenella Fownes, who's the owner of Blue Steel Printing, one of the original investors in the project, passionate about wellness. She's an international marketing expert who has done projects in Hong Kong, Calcutta, Bangalore, and London. And then we have Kim, who is actually new to Powell River, but is also in small business and moved here because Powell River is a place that attracts people who are interested in wellness business. And I'm here to talk about a project that I started 4 years ago. It actually also connects back to my family's history in small business in the interior, which is in the wine industry. We've been involved in value-added agriculture and community development for decades, since about 1973. However, I left the Okanagan and came to Powell River because Powell River is one of the first places in Canada to adopt a non-GMO standard. Most of our production is organic, or at least heritage. I have been a homeowner in the Cathet Regional District for almost 26 years. And for 16 of that have had a small heritage sheep farm, which is now in Paradise Valley. We also have 85 heritage apple trees, 65 different varieties of trees, fig trees, persimmon trees, and of course a large vegetable garden and many other fruit trees. It's a very good integrated farm. So from that, I have been very interested in value-added agriculture, which specifically is a distillery. Was one of the founders of Salish Sea Spirits, which is now Beach Gardens. And we have started a new distillery, which is also BC Craft Distilling, and it will have heritage apples. The reason I'm coming here is actually bringing all of this together. So 4 years ago, I began working with a company called GOCO Hospitality, which is the world leader for wellness, hospitality development, and alternative healthcare. And when I say alternative, it's now becoming very common for people to go to natural boosting of the immune system. GOCO Hospitality has been doing that for 30 years. They've done over $4 billion globally in wellness, and they're advocates. And the concept that I took to them was to bring Ayurveda from India, traditional Chinese medicine, and naturopathy to the Powell River region, specifically Cathet, because the official community plan, of course, is nature, heritage, and wellness. So you take the very best of a pristine natural environment and you bring the very best of the world's responses to life science. And GOCO Hospitality signed on to bring something to Cathet about 2.5 years ago. Originally, I had the founder, Ingo Schweder, coming. I asked him to not come today, and I'll explain why a little bit later. The second company that is involved in this project is called HP Capital out of London, England. Dr. Deepak Narwal was also going to join us, and I asked him not to come today. He has met with Laura Rodden previously in a conference call to talk about their technology, and I'll explain that now. HP Capital are world leaders out of London with many projects around the world in alternative building technology. They have a negative carbon emission building envelope. They have something similar to what Pacific Homes has on the island, which is pre-manufactured walls and systems. However, what's unique in their technology is they recapture the energy and any waste, whether it's wastewater or gray water, and they turn it into electric power. So they are an off-grid integrated system, and they bring their, what they call a flying factory, onto the site, and they construct whether it's residential, institutional, or commercial, they will construct the buildings, and there's about 40 engineers that go on site, and all the buildings will go up in about 1 year. So those are the partners in this project. This project actually is a project that is about $250 million US in value. It will be the single largest change in Powell River's economy that we've seen since the mill. And I think it's interesting that I followed the presentation from the forest sector, because of course Powell River was originally founded on the forest industry. There are many of us who would like to see us move out of a primary extractive economy and into a tertiary economy, and one that's built on wellness and protecting nature is fundamental. The reason I asked Ingo Schweder and Dr. Deepak Narwal to not attend is because this morning, the offer that I put in for the final offer on the Brew Bay acquisition was not accepted. A different conventional developer has been given an opportunity to develop on that property. So I'm going to tell you that you have the maps, you have the 188-page concept paper that I've developed with GOCO Hospitality. The project is still alive. It may not come to Powell River now, which is unfortunate. Of course, international players are what we would say agnostic to location, but I'm not. I really wanted this for Powell River. It would have created at least 200 jobs. It will create 200 jobs. It will create a lot of spinoffs. And with the closing of the mill, we really saw this as an enormous opportunity to take all the work that so many of us have done for so long and create new jobs and a whole new economy. So in this vision, wherever we put it, but certainly for the last almost 3 years that I've worked with the owners of the property to acquire, we set aside the entire ocean front. We set aside more than the riparian zones to protect the hatchery being a fundamental part of the vision. We have a unique concept for an eco-hub. We're working with Powell River Educational Service Society on that. Dr. Andrew Weaver of the University of Victoria Marine and Ocean Sciences was going to help us with the Marine Conservation Center there. I've known him for decades. He met with Dr. J. Ewell several times on the development. So the plan is still there. If somebody in Powell River has a different location, I would much rather be in Cathet. The original reason for asking for this meeting was to ask for a letter from the regional district, not to specifically support the concept, because I know that's not your role, but to assist us in unlocking the financing from HB Capital by explaining on paper the role of the local government in the building permitting process. They were having a hard time understanding it because they'd never seen it before, and they do work all over the world. I'm still going to ask for the letter for 2 reasons. There is always a chance that even if there's an accepted offer that it won't pass. I can tell you I have all the financing for acquisition and the entire build out of the project. And there may be somebody in Powell River who's sitting on another property in Cathet, and it will always be my first choice to bring this home and to let Powell River be exactly what it should be, which is the most beautiful place in the world with the very best destination, medical, wellness, and environmental concept that comes out of all the hard work of all the people. And of course, we had an enormous local food component and a value-added food component as part of the project. And I want to just give Lisa Bartello a chance to do about 1 minute on the wellness thing.
First, I wanted to thank Esme Sturgeon and Michelle Jones because I had no idea what the process was, and I was in the timelines or anything, and I didn't know what I was doing, and completely helped indulge my well, I don't want to call it ignorance, but my lack of knowledge. So that was such a great first experience with the regional district. So I just wanted to bring to you the idea of health and wellness, what it really is for me, and because health is on a continuum, right? And obviously it's being at the forefront. You know, we have trillions of cells in our body, and our entire health and well-being is contingent on the oxygen in our cells and how we view it. And Judy called it alternative, but I would really argue or right to the ground that actually traditional medicine is been around for 1,000 years, but a lot of it has disappeared in the last 100 years. So I am part of the World Organization of Natural Medicine and the Board of Integrative Medicine and the Canadian College of Humanitarian Medicine. So fortunately, not only am I a walking miracle by about 100 times that I'm still on this earth, which has blessed me with the greatest journey to understand the human body, but also I have met some amazing practitioners around the world who are truly bringing true wellness. So we understand our own bodies. Like, this is the most fundamental thing, is to bring our health sovereignty back within, so we understand how our own body works. So that felt really important to me to this project. It's like, why is this important to Powell River? And I came here after I heard that you don't allow the grounds to be sprayed with glyphosates and pesticides. Actually, it took me 45 minutes after I heard even just the periphery of this project. It took me 45 minutes to decide to pack up my entire life and move here. And I feel more home here than I've ever felt anywhere in the world. So I have doctor friends, for example, in Thailand, working with the Thai government. Dr. Thomas Lodi, Stop Making Cancer. And these are people that, quickly wrap it up. But these are people that, you know, they have miraculous things all the time with health. You know, cancer is near and dear to our heart. A friend in Budapest who his daughter bathes in super oxygenated water that he invented. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. To put that in context, that's what Steve Jobs died of. So the president of the World Organization of Natural Medicine, where we can practice in 23 countries, we have no one supporting us, no corporate, no big pharma. So this is the vision for health and wellness, to truly bring this kind of wellness. I know it's on a continuum. Some people aren't even ready to experience that, you know, for 50 years perhaps, but in the world, this could truly change the face of healthcare in the entire world. It will change. It's just a question of when. And not only is all of this expanse available, but personally, I'm practicing this. I use quantum tools right here in this building. So I just really wanted to drive that point home, that's why you see so many people behind you, as well as like this passionate view to really, truly change the face of wellness. And somebody made a reference to high blood pressure, and that's a simple thing too, with copper cream on the radial artery. And that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate you all coming today. I open it up to the directors. Any questions for the delegation? Director Gisborne.
Thank you for coming in. So is my understanding correct from your presentation that it sounds like the property might be going to another owner?
Although I had a number of share purchase agreements over the years, they decided to list when the last one expired, but I continued to work on the project and actually obtain the financing and the financing partner. However, they gave a deadline for offers, and there were 2 conventional development offers that came in at the same time. I don't have the details of that. I think given the significance of the property, they will release that. But the sandstone project that came before the regional board was the one that was marketed before. As you know, that does subdivide the oceanfront. And in the almost 3 years that I was looking for financing, the reason I didn't get it, other than COVID interfering and slowing things down, is that without exception, when it came to the final decision, the investors all said, but you know what, honey, we're going to be subdividing that waterfront. And I said, no, we're not. So I finally found people who understood that the highest value of that land was to set aside the waterfront for the community of perpetuity. But I don't believe I don't think anyone else shares that view. So yes, this morning I was told that although I did accept the counter, and I did exceed the asking price, and I did have the financing, that they've gone with someone else and he's giving them 30 days. So, and the rest of it, you'd have to ask them for that.
Okay. And my one follow-up question, and maybe Ms. Rodden can help me on this one. The letter that's being asked, would that be a letter of comfort? Is that my understanding? And that's the question to the manager of planning services.
Yeah, I could answer that, Chair.
Go ahead, Laura, or Ms. Rodden, sorry.
Yes, what Judy is asking for is a comfort letter. I have provided a couple of letters to date to the group. So I'm not entirely clear on what the parameters of the letter that's being asked for now is. So we'd need to sort that out. But perhaps since another offer has been accepted, I'm not sure if the letter is still required.
I was going to ask the same question. I understand you came in here with a certain request, but now that property is no longer being considered, at least for the time being. Yeah. So I imagine the request has changed, or the request has just been dropped at this point.
Well, I actually would like the request, and what I'd like to do, the request is, as I said, it's not asking for support of the concept. What they've asked for is clarity that there would be no local approval if they own the land to build on it, assuming that they're outside the riparian zones and they conform with higher levels of government's requirements. And Lord has been really good at trying to meet it. The first letter, the way they read it, because it referenced development permit areas and didn't say only in riparian zones, they read that meaning they had to have a development permit. And they said, that's fine if they need to do that. But then we had a really one that would be very clear to anyone here, which said, there's no building bylaw, there's no zoning bylaw. There were three things. It was very clear to anyone here, but they said, yes, but it doesn't say in order to build, you don't need any further local approval. And the banks there in Europe didn't understand what the letter said. So we would still like it for two reasons. There are actually two other properties in Cathat that may be good for this project. And of course, if the offer that's been accepted doesn't complete, and if the partners choose to go back again, then we definitely would need that letter for HP Capital, because then then there's no more impediment to their financing.
Okay. Personally, I'll open it up to the directors as well afterwards, but I'm a bit concerned about doing a letter like this because we have no idea where the property is. We don't know how or if it will conform to the official community plans for the areas. So it'd be nice to have at least a look at that prior to even considering a letter. And I mean, I understand what Ms. Rodden has provided with you already, which is the same sort of information she would provide to any potential developer. I'm a little worried that going beyond that may make us appear biased towards your group versus any other organization that may also be interested. I'll open this up to anybody else who has any questions or comments. None? Okay.
So McCormick was first.
Sorry, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. I tend to agree with you. Unless we know the particulars of a project, it's really hard for us to say that we love it or we hate it or anything at all about it. So I know I couldn't, guarantee anything until I knew all of the details about what is being proposed. Thank you.
Any other comments? Or Director Gisbart?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I guess my question would then be for Ms. Rodden, because I took a look at the official community plan, and on the waterfront side of the highway, it appears to be designated as suburban residential. Would this wellness retreat, conform more closely to, commercial recreation designation? And would that, difference in designation be a challenge for issuing a letter of comfort, or is that kind of neither here nor there with what's being asked in relation to building permits and an actual zoning bylaw being in place on that property or the lack thereof? That's a question for Ms. Rodden, if she has an answer, if I made any sense in my question. Thank you.
Well, from what I understand, we're not considering this particular property anymore, so I'm not sure if the question has much relevance.
Well, would that be the same on any property if it wasn't, like, would a project of this type require designation as commercial recreation in order to gain the letter of comfort for that activity? Like on any property, is that kind of the designation?
Ms. Rodden, if you have a response to that.
Yes, Chair. Yeah, it would be site specific. So the proposal for the Brew Bay property was not, it's not entirely consistent with the OCP and the land use designations, because what's being proposed south of the highway is really a commercial development. And while there is some commercial land on that parcel, it's quite small in comparison to the proposed development. So, but the fact of the matter is there is no zoning bylaw and no building bylaw. So there is no requirement actually for any owner of land who's going to develop to, no requirement for any approvals or permits. It would only be if there was a subdivision application that was part of the development, and that would trigger the development permit and comprehensive development area agreement and riparian setbacks, et cetera. So really it's only the higher levels of government that have any role of approvals for this parcel at Brew Bay. Other parcels, it would be very site specific. It would depend what bylaws apply, et cetera.
Okay, thank you very much.
Just want to clarify something.
Okay.
We're not asking for letter of support. The words that Ms. Rodden just said, that's all we're asking for, what she just said. It's agnostic to the property in Cathet. So what I'm saying is, in the event that the regional district believes a project like this would have some benefit to Powell River, all we're asking for is a statement that is roughly the sentence that she just said. That's it. It doesn't matter about the project.
Okay, was that sentiment included in one of the previous letters that she has already?
Not exactly, very close, but not exactly. And I want to make it clear, if we were asking for your support of the concept, we would need more time than 10 minutes and we would lay it out. We're not. We're just saying, could we please have a statement of the reality of the parameters for approvals in Cathet? So if there was, that's the comfort letter we need. It's just slightly more than the second letter she gave us.
Okay. I mean, we don't have a motion in front of us. I get the impression that people aren't exactly comfortable with the concept right now, just writing an open-ended letter, but I don't see any hands up. Dr. Gisborne?
I guess this is a question for our staff. Would it be possible to issue a letter which is very much in line with what our manager of planning services just said at this meeting? Like more of like verbatim. It's a question more for staff of, is that something that's possible for us to do?
I mean, I guess anything is possible for us to do, I imagine.
Then
the board.
I'll put forward such a motion if the corporate officer can assist in the wording of it. And if our staff is agreeable.
Okay, do we have a seconder for it? I think we all have an idea as to what the motion will say.
Can we, for the corporate officer, can we please have the wording for the motion?
Dr. Gisborne?
Sure, give me a moment. I'll type something up.
You can say it and I'll type it. Well, yeah. Either way works. Thank you.
I'll try and not put too many feet in my mouth. That the committee recommend the board issue a letter to the GOCO proponents in line with the comments made by the manager of planning services. Is that enough?
No, sorry, Chair. Sorry, through the chair. Perhaps Laura Rodden may provide the actual wording we're looking for.
Yeah.
Yes, Ms. Rodden.
I'm sorry. I'm feeling quite awkward about this. I mean, I think it sounds like an amazing project and an amazing group of people, but I wasn't willing to put that statement in writing because there is no certainty that the project would move ahead in compliance with the OCP, because it's not entirely consistent with the OCP. And this is a high profile property, and based on our past experience of public consultation on this property, there's a lot of people that are interested in what's going to happen. And so that's why I wasn't willing to put that. And it's the board's prerogative. You can make a decision to send a letter saying that there's no approvals required.
Okay, thank you very much. Director McCormick.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't support sending a letter, although I think the project sounds wonderful and it would be of great benefit to those who participate. But my concern is how it relates to the specific site. For example, at Brew Bay, would that take away all the waterfront from the public realm? Would people still be able to walk along the ocean? I imagine the people who would attend retreats or whatever in this facility would be paying a good price for that. So you're dealing with a high-end clientele, and I don't want to see the public suffer because of that. So I have trouble offering support to anything until I know exactly where it is and how that's going to affect the public around there. So not that I'm not saying it's a great project. It is a great project, and I wish you a lot of success, and I look forward to you coming back with a specific plan to move forward with a specific site. So to me, the site is very important. So thank you.
Thank you.
In fact, she's
Sure. I think we need to move on here. We're almost 9 minutes over the question period. So we have a motion in front of us.
No, we don't.
We don't right now. I'm just wondering if Director Gisborne is motion or.
After hearing the comments from the manager of planning service, I think I'd have to go away and come up with some better wording for how such a letter could be issued, because it wouldn't be the standard letter of comfort of saying, everything's fine. It would have to be more of, that we don't issue building permits. We don't issue those development permits for this site unless it's riparian, which I know can be challenging, when dealing with companies in other countries. Other parts of BC don't necessarily know the uniqueness of our community, and that can be a challenge. Okay.
No motion is being made then?
Not at this time. Sorry, Chair.
Let's go.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't think we have any more discussion. Appreciate you all coming and wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
On to report 7.1. Ms. Rodden has a verbal report.
Back up.
Something? Oh, I'm sorry. Correspondence. I shot up too quickly. 6.1 correspondence dated March 9th, 2022 from Jim Sclater, Savary Island resident RE land use process. How do we proceed?
I will move receipt of the letter and ask staff for some advice for us as to how we can overcome the problem as mentioned in the letter, and I'll speak to that later.
Okay, so we have a seconder, Dr. McCormick. Thank you very much.
Chair, the issue that Mr. Sclater has raised has been going on ever since I became a director 20 years ago almost. It's exasperated by the tourism community in the QRD, which continues to advertise that Savary is a delightful place to visit. And by all means, go there. There are no public facilities on Savary. There is no provision for the public to enjoy the place and have any of the amenities that one would normally expect. I think it's getting worse, and I think that Mr. Sclater has now discovered that there's further advertising going on glamping. That's a term I learned a few years ago. So I would like some assistance from staff planning services as to what we can do, if anything, to get the word out that no, you should not push Savary as a destination to go visit, not even on a day trip.
Okay, so is there a motion in there, or we're just asking for some advice right now?
Staff for advice.
Staff.
No, it's in the motion, Chair.
Okay. We have a seconder. Is there any other discussion? Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I read the individual's letter. He makes some requests. For example, one of them was requesting tree cutting permits. And however, Ms. Rodden, please correct me if I'm mistaken. My understanding is that if the area is not riparian or an identified natural hazard area, then regional districts and electoral areas don't even have the legislative authority to implement or enforce such a requirement for tree cutting permits. I believe that came up at some of our political conventions in the past where other regional districts were trying to bring in tree cutting permits, and the province was very clear saying that that ability is only left for municipalities. Is that understanding correct?
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, is that understanding correct, that a tree cutting permit in our rural areas can only be for riparian or natural hazard areas?
I'm not certain. My understanding is that if the regional district wanted to, they could work with the community to develop a tree cutting bylaw if that was of interest to Savary Island.
Okay. Might I say that the motion in front of us is just dealing with advice on how to work with tourism, correct? It's not about tree cutting permits.
I make no reference to tree cutting.
Right. So is there any other discussion pertaining to the motion in front of us? Seeing none, can we get the motion put up on the screen so we know what we're voting on?
Yes, and actually, thank you, Chair. If the chair could confirm or work with me on rating on this.
I'll turn to Director Brabazon.
Yes, Director Brabazon.
Here we go. Everybody see that?
Yep, that'll do.
Okay, so we have the motion in front of us. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Okay, now we're on to 7.1. How the Parks and Green Space Plan informs staff recommendations on park dedication at time of subdivision. Rodden, verbal report.
Thank you, Chair. I have a presentation prepared, so I'll just share my screen. And this presentation was requested by the board several months ago. And can everybody see my screen? Can people see my screen?
Not anymore.
Okay.
I can see the presentation.
There's too much.
Okay.
It is. I'll expand that. Okay, we're doing better. There we go.
Okay. So this presentation is at the request of the board. Several months ago, there was a request for staff to make a presentation on how the Parks and Green Space Plan informs recommendations on park dedication at the time of subdivision. And I have been waiting until we received a subdivision plan that triggered the park dedication requirement. And we do have a subdivision report on tonight's agenda that does trigger subdivision. So I think the timing is good for this presentation to be heard. So the requirement for park dedication comes out of Section 510 of the Provincial Local Government Act. And so it sets a requirement for provision of parkland or payment for park purposes at the time of subdivision. And some of the key points in that section 510 are that this applies to subdivisions that create 3 or more new lots. It does not apply if the smallest lot created is larger than 2 hectares. And if the local government may determine whether the owner of land must provide parkland or payment for park purposes, if the local government provides a community park service. In this case, the RD has a community park service established for each of the 4 electoral areas A, B, C, and D. And if the local government official community plan contains policies and designations respecting the location and type of future parks. And this regional district has all of its OCPs do contain this information. And so it is at the discretion of the regional district whether the owner provides park or payment. And the amount of land that may be required or used for establishing the amount that may be paid must not exceed 5% of the market value of land being proposed for subdivision. So this is the nuts and bolts of the legislative requirement. Then there's a recommended best practice that's highlighted in a provincial publication called Park Acquisition Best Practices Guide. It was put out by the Ministry of Community Services a number of years ago, which is now the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And it states this best practice around land versus cash in lieu. And it says in general that landowners should expect to provide or dedicate land in locations where a park has been identified in an official community plan or referenced in other land use planning documents through specific policies or illustrations on a land use map. Where future park locations are not identified or referenced in planning documents and development applications are consistent with land use plans, it is reasonable for owners to expect to contribute cash in lieu of land. So when staff prepare reports on proposed subdivision plans, there's 3 strategic documents that guide the recommendations that we make to the board. So first of all, of course, it's the official community plan for the area where the property is located, and what specific policies and designations related to future parks, green space, and recreation. And these would be policies and designations only in the current bylaw for that area, because all previous bylaws would have been rescinded at the time that the current bylaw was adopted. The second strategic document is the Parks and Green Space Plan, and it contains recommendations related to specific priority park acquisition sites and conservation sites. And then the other key document is the Regional Trails Plan, which includes recommendations related to specific priority trail areas and desired trail connections. And I'm going to do a bit of a walkthrough through these documents. So we have 5 official community plans, and each of those plans had comprehensive community engagement process to inform and shape the final document. And those processes for each of those plans lasted for an average of 2 years. And each OCP includes specific policies and designations related to areas of interest for future parks, green space, and recreation. Now, the OCPs for areas A, B, and C, and for Texada reflect the specific priority park acquisition and conservation sites from the Regional District's Parks and Green Space Plan. And the OCP for Texada also reflects the specific priority trail areas from the Regional Trails Plan. And that's because it's the most recent OCP that was adopted. On the other hand, the OCP for Savary Island predates both the Parks and Green Space Plan and the Regional Trails Plan. But it still does have policies around specific sites on the island. Now, the Parks and Green Space Plan was completed and accepted by the board in 2010. It too was informed by a comprehensive community engagement process, which was region-wide and involved over 500 people. And the recommendations in the plan related to priority park acquisition sites and conservation sites are what staff refer to. And those recommendations informed the OCPs for areas A, B, C, and D. So the specific sites that are identified in the Parks and Green Space Plan there's in section 5.1, it sets out park acquisition priorities. Those are Eagle River, Hayshalt Lake, Orpana Lakes, Savary Island Waterfront, Stillwater Bluffs, Stromberg Falls, and they're in section 5.2 identifies a conservation priority, and that's Lang Creek and Mahood Beach. I have put in here which electoral area each of these sites are located in. Then section 5.3 sets out secondary parks and green space priorities. And I have added the electoral areas for these mainland sites as well, so you can see where they're located. And then the Texada Island sites are grouped in Lasqueti Island. But given we don't do the planning service for Lasqueti, staff rarely look at those. And there is a map located in the Parks and Green Space Plan on page 57 and 58, which identifies all of these areas, the areas on the preceding slides and this slide. So you can see exactly where they are located, and they were included in the plan as priorities and secondary priorities because they received the highest number of people that thought these areas were important. And while there are other areas that were identified through the engagement process, maybe it was one person or a couple of people, these sites all had a larger number of people interested in them. Then there's the regional trails plan. So it too had a comprehensive community engagement process, which was region-wide. Also somewhere around 500 people in total that participated. It sets out recommendations related to priority trail areas and desired trail connections. And the recommendations informed the Area D official community plan. And so the regional trails plan recommendations, there's the key ones that we look to are in section 5.2, the proposed priorities by trail area. And these areas are all identified on a key map in that plan, which is on page 29, figure 2. And I have identified on this slide which electoral area each of those trail areas are located in. And some of them straddle the city, electoral area B, some straddle electoral area B and C, et cetera. The regional trails plan also sets out desired trail connections. So the priority connections that were identified were between the Penticton Maze trails and the Duck Lake trails, and between Lund and the Sunshine Coast Trail. And then there were some other desired trail connections as well. And there is a map in the plan that identifies where those desired connections are. And that is located, it's figure 8 in the plan on page 53. And so then I have a few slides just to provide some recent examples of subdivisions that the Planning Committee and the board have considered that triggered the requirement for parkland. And I'll just quickly walk through them. So the first, I've taken one example from each electoral area. So the first example was the Victory Road subdivision. It's in electoral area C, and it's a approximately 13-hectare parcel that was subdivided into 6 parcels. And the recommendation was for payment in lieu of park dedication. And the basis for that recommendation was that the parcel did not contain any area of park or trail interest identified in the Parks and Green Space Plan, or the Regional Trails Plan, or the Area C OCP policies or designations. And this subdivision did go through to final approval, and a property appraisal was done, and a payment of $22,200 was paid to the regional district, and it went to the Community Parks Reserve for Area C. The next example is from Area A. This was the recent subdivision up near the top of Sarah Point Road. It's an approximately 62 hectare parcel, 28 lots proposed, and staff recommended payment in lieu of park provision for this subdivision as well, because the subject parcel did not contain any area of park or trail interest identified in the Parks and Green Space Plan, or the Regional Trails Plan, or the Area A OCP policies or designations. And payment of this payment is pending an appraisal, which has been coordinated, and we're just waiting for the appraisal to deliver the report, and then we will invoice the property owner. Third example was from Electoral Area B. This was the Nootka Street subdivision. It's approximately a 25 hectare parcel. The subdivision proposed was for 5 lots, and staff recommended payment in lieu of park provision. The basis for that was that the subject parcel didn't contain any areas of park or trail interest identified in the Parks and Green Space Plan, the Regional Trails Plan, or Area B OCP policies or designations. And we're also waiting for an appraisal to be completed of this property, and then we'll invoice for the amount owing. And then the fourth example is from Area D, Texada Island. It was the Wall Street subdivision. This is an approximately 14 hectare parcel, 6 lots proposed. And here staff recommended provision of parkland along Emily Lake. And the basis for that was the subject parcel contained an area of park and trail interest that was identified in both the Regional Trails Plan and in Texada OCP policies and designations. And the provision of the parkland is pending an appraisal as well. So we have 3 appraisals in the offing. So those are some examples, and I am happy to answer any questions. I'm also happy to entertain any questions at a later date from any of the directors if you wanted to learn more about how staff use these documents.
Great, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. Open it up. Any questions for Ms. Rodden? Yes, Director McCormick.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this report. I was on the advisory committee that developed the Parks and Green Space Plan, so it's interesting to be talking about it some 12 or 14 years later. I do have a question regarding the Emily Lake subdivision, and that is, has that been approved yet? Do we know if that has been approved by government?
A preliminary layout review was issued, and the applicant is working their way through the conditions in that letter. So generally what happens is they'll reach out to me when they are dealing with what the regional district conditions were, and I haven't heard from them yet.
Oh, okay. All right. So then the way you use this plan would definitely help to not only acquire additional parkland, but also revenue for acquiring sites that come down the road. So I think that's great. Very happy with that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Dr. Gisborne?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question about the Parks and Green Space Plan on page 16 and 17. On page 16, it says Southern Region Official Community Plan, which is now Area B and Area C Official Community Plans. Key recommendations related to parks and green space. And then at the end of it on page 17, it says the regional district's policy with respect to the acquisition of land for regional parks or community parks is to acquire such land at no cost from the Crown, by gift from the registered owner, by funds acquired through section 9410F of the Local Government Act, or by dedication upon subdivision. So I think that this policy is in relation to the presentation that we just had about subdivision and parkland dedication. It then goes to say priorities for parkland acquisition in the planning area by these methods will be as follows. And it has A, B, C, and D. D is the last one that I find of interest. Areas identified as environmentally sensitive development permit areas on map number 3, or wildlife habitats may be acquired as nature parks. These parks will be used and managed in a manner that will preserve their sensitive or unique features. I'm wondering how do those wildlife habitat corridors or environmentally sensitive development permit areas get taken into consideration at time of subdivision, or are they not taken into account? And if so, I'm just curious as to why.
Ms. Rodden?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a big document. So there's a lot of components to this document. And it's interesting that you've zoned in on that section. That section it's about background reports and studies that informed the development of this plan. So this plan was completed and accepted in 2010. So the background documents are all older documents, some of which are like their bylaws that have been rescinded. And so I think that there's a rich body of information in there, but the strategic parts of the plan are in the recommendations section, and that's what staff use, is the recommendations. So that would be from, starting on page 44 of the document. There is a lot of rich information in the previous sections, but for these purposes, when we're reviewing subdivision plans, we're zoning in on the specific recommendations.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? If not, thank you very much for the presentation. It's very informative. We'll move on to item 7.2, subdivision application, lot 5, block 2, north 1/2 of section 11, Texada Island, District Plan 18528, Electoral Area D. We have a recommendation. And we have a mover, Dr. McCormick, seconded by Dr. Brabazon. Any discussion? Being none, all in favor? Any opposed? None opposed? Motion carries. 7.3, subdivision application, block 9, southwest quarter of section 8, Texada Island, District Plan 8208, Electoral Area D. Again, Director McCormick has moved it, seconded by Director Gisborne. Any discussion? Director McCormick.
Yeah, thank you. Since we've just had the presentation regarding, parks and subdivisions, this is a 3-lot subdivision, yet I don't see a requirement for park in there. Ms. Rodden, can you explain?
Yes, the trigger is if 3 or more new lots. So this is creating 3 lots, but it's only 2 new lots. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. You didn't use the word new before, so that's why I was just okay. All right, so it's got to be 3 new lots.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Item 8.1, new business, land use regulation policies. Director Good, I will turn it over to you.
I'll make the motion, and if I get a seconder, I'll speak to it.
Okay, we have seconder, Director Brabazon.
Okay, thank you. We had our Let's Talk Land Use Public Engagement report that we had last month, where we heard from the public about land use regulations in their area. Let's see, February, I believe our CAO made comments, and I believe our CAO makes comments based on policy. The comments regarding the introduction and the implementation of new zoning bylaws was and continues to be a big item for discussion in our community. And I believe we heard what the public's wishes were. I believe the comment made was that the property owners directly impacted by the land use regulations was the one whose votes really counted. My disagreement at that time was that the property owners who are liable to pay for those regulations is the ones whose votes really count. So we had the Electoral Area Directors Forum recently, and I asked around to other electoral area directors, and what I heard was that the generally accepted norm is that those who pay for the services are the ones whose voice really counts. And, regardless of whether the zoning bylaw directly impacts their property or not. So I'm just wondering, where's the policy behind who in our community is really impacted? Is it those who are just having the zoning bylaw directly impact them, or is it those who pay for it? And based on what we heard from the public, I think it should be, up to, more so the electoral area or the general planning service. So maybe I'm just a little confused right now, and hopefully with this staff report that's being requested, we can actually get some clarification and hopefully then better serve our communities. Thank you, Chair.
Director Brabazon, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I too hope we can eliminate the confusion around this. I'm not sure there is much confusion, but I'll start with the comment in this motion relevant to the comments made by the Chief Administrative Officer. This motion asks for one staff member to comment on the comments of another staff member. I think that is exceedingly inappropriate. We should not place any of our staff in the position of having to comment or critique the comments of another staff member. That's the sort of thing that's done away from this table, and they can resolve their issues as they wish there. For that reason, I will not be supporting this motion. I have another reason for not supporting this motion, and it's and now I'm going to speak to eliminating confusion. Director Gisborne has spoken before about the greater community, the Area B or the whole of the RD voting on particular zoning because, in fact, we all pay for the planning service. However, he's also mentioned that there was a referendum on Nootka Street. I reviewed the Nootka Street file, 1999. There was indeed a referendum. It was confined to the people who were affected by the zoning area. No one else voted, and no one was asked to vote, and no one's opinion was sought at the time. Since then, Area B has acquired 2 more zones, Myrtle Pond and Traff. Again, there was no referendum. There was no question of a referendum. And to suggest, as Director Gisborne just did, that the good people of Oakover in my area are in Gillies Bay in Director McCormick's area are going to pass judgment on the neighborhood in area C or area B is frankly, again, grossly inappropriate. Let's put this issue of referenda and who votes on a zoning to bed. It's the people directly affected in the zoning area. The rest of us can stand back and let the people in the neighborhood decide.
Okay,
so I will be voting no.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Director Gisborne.
Yeah. I'm not referring to the greater regional district, just the electoral area planning service area. What occurred 23 years ago and what occurs today, I think, are different. The survey question that we asked the public was, do you want more regulations in your area? And the consultant said that by area, they meant their electoral area. So that is where I think the question that we asked the public wasn't, do you want more regulations on your property, but do you want more regulations in your electoral area? That was the question asked. We heard back from the community, and I think we need to respect them. Thank you.
Okay, with no other hands up, I'll call the question. All in favor of Director Gisborne's motion? Any opposed? Okay, it does not carry. Oh, sorry. Directors Brabazon, Brander, and McCormick opposed. We move question period. I don't believe Mr. Glinsky is with us today. And there's no in-camera session, so the meeting is adjourned. Thanks for coming.
Have a good night, everyone.